everyone, and welcome back to Book Talk with Kara. Today, I am delighted to have my friend Kristen Parnell back with me. And some of you may remember when she was here a couple years ago when we were talking about one of her books in the Crossroads Suspense series. And now we're here to talk about a collection that she's in. I'm in the first book. She's in the fourth book. So it's so fun that we're writing together in this series. And then we'll talk about the third book in that series that we were talking about before. So there's all the things. But before we get to that, Kristen, why don't you take just a moment to remind everybody who you are and how you got started writing?
Thanks, Kara. It's so good to be back with you. And yes, my name is Kristen Parnell, and all the things as far as writing goes. The last few years have been a blur. You can probably see some of the toys in the background. My little toddler is thankfully playing with grandma right now. But I primarily write Christian romantic suspense. So that series is Crossroads Suspense. And then I was thrilled to be part of this collection with Long Hot Summer. So like you said, you're book one, I'm in book 4, Truth. And so that was just a real treat.
Yeah, and it's so fun that you're in it. And each one of these collections has had 4 books in it. And they're all, romantic suspense, and there's a lot going on. But yours is an interesting one because it's about someone who's returning home. So beneath the crushing waves, you've got a single mom. She's returning home, and there's just a lot going on. So how did you come up with the idea for this novel that's part of the collection?
Sure. So this one really was kind of like a lightning strike moment. We were on vacation in Rosemary Beach, which is the setting for this for my novella. And we were almost in a car accident. This car just veered straight out of his lane into ours and just careened into these bushes. And thankfully we were fine. No one was injured as far as I know, but I just got to thinking, wow, what happened? What's the why behind this crazy situation?
Yeah.
And so that's where the story kind of came from. Like, what if? Well, what if the driver had been a victim? What if, my heroine became involved in figuring out what had happened to him? So that's where the story came from. Just a simple family vacation with a near miss accident.
Well, and I love that. That's how a lot of our stories will often happen. There's some event, there's something that we see that then starts that kernel of a what if that then we can't let go of. And then we just kind of keep adding to it, and it spools into this much bigger idea and story. And so you've got all these layers, though. It's not just this whodunit. You've got more that's going on. So how do you know what layers to add to your stories?
Oh, that's a good question. And some of that does come out in editing. But I try to figure out, okay, what is something that we can all relate to in the heroine? So my heroine, single mom, obviously there's a lot of backstory there. But for her, it's just this longing. She had this dream for a big family, and now it's just her and her daughter. Her husband tragically died. So thank the Lord, that hasn't been my experience, but some people it has. But regardless, we all have longings or things we thought were going to happen and that don't happen. So I kind of walk her through, as it's not a full-length novel, but develop those stages of grief and lament, and how do you come out of that, and how does God enable you to survive those crushing waves in your life? So literally it's set by the beach, and there is some definite suspense there as far as the setting, but how those more figurative, those emotional layers. So I try to take the setting and then weave that into my own heroine's arc, if you will.
Yeah, I love that because then it creates this story that couldn't happen anywhere else. The setting
Right.
becomes almost that character, which Colleen Coble and I are always talking about. If you can move the story out of that setting and plop it somewhere else, then it's probably not embedded in the location enough. There needs to be enough where you feel like, okay, it could only really happen here without major changes to the story or the plot. So the idea that, coming out from under the grief and the waves
Mhm.
of that emotion makes so much sense, and is a great way to layer in complexity and make a story
Mhm.
much richer than just, okay, we're being chased or we're trying to
Right.
fall in love.
Exactly.
So, how did you decide that romantic suspense was going to be your genre?
It took a while because I actually started writing young adult fiction under my maiden name. And then when I got married, I just felt that tug. There was always an element of subtle romance in young adult fiction as well. But I thought, well, this is a natural progression. Let's move that into the fiction for women. And so that kind of really started to take place as my own love story blossomed, and it just seemed like a natural progression. I also, loved reading romantic suspense, whether it's Danny Petrie or Colin Coble, or like you said, there's a whole gamut, Lynette Eason, Diane Mills. So I loved reading the genre, and I said, well, this makes sense for me. So now it's so fun to be part of a collection where some of the authors that I love reading, I get to be part of.
Yeah, that is fun. And writing is so often
Mhm.
solitary that it's really fun when you get to kind of collaborate with others. And
Right.
in collections like this, sometimes they can be really connected and sometimes they're not. Like in
Right.
ours, we just put like this small little thread that wove everybody
Sure.
together, but it was just very light. But it was like,
Yeah,
it's just fun for readers when you
it
can do
is.
something like that. Um, and it's fun as an author to be able to connect with other writers and really work on things like that. So when you think about this particular book, Beneath the
Mhm.
Crushing Waves, is there anything about it that was in their first draft that you're like, this has got to stay? And then when you got into editing, you were like, nope, this has got to go. It's just not working like I thought it was.
I don't know if there's one thing that I could pinpoint, but I do know that in editing, I had to reframe the timeline. So in my first
Mm.
draft, and my editor pointed this out to me, marks of a good editor, she catches these things. She said the hero didn't initially realize that the heroine was back in town because, again, she's returning to her hometown to move back in with her parents so that she can support her young daughter as she goes back into the teaching realm. And so initially, he was surprised that she was back, and the time frame would have been he would have her so happens her dad is his kind of mentor at church. They're part of the same Bible study, and yet he's surprised that she's back in town. And my editor friend was like, Kristen, if her dad is his mentor and he doesn't know, there's no way he wouldn't know. That would have been like a prayer request. That would have been, and I was like, oh, you're so right. The timing, I can't make that work. So I had to reframe the calendar so that he had been out. He hadn't moved back to town yet either until after her tragic situation. So, timelines, those things definitely I had to make improvements to. But as far as
Yeah.
something I took out, I don't think I necessarily took something out. I did add things in, but I can't think of something else that I took out.
Well, and often that's what really happens in edits.
Hmm.
Every once in a while, they'll be like, you have to remove something. But a lot of times it's
Right.
like, well, we need to beef this up, or,
Right.
oh, this doesn't quite work. And so it's
Hmm.
always interesting to see if there are things, because
Right.
sometimes people are like, I really wanted this in and it just didn't
It didn't
stick.
work.
Yeah. So, what's your biggest challenge right now as an author?
Biggest challenge is honestly finding time to write. I am
Yeah.
so thankful for this season where I can stay home with my son and I work part time from home. So that's just a huge blessing, but very challenging as far as finding time to write. I'll see social media posts about, oh, I cranked out like 5,000 words today. And I'm like, in a different season.
Yeah,
So,
I think that's an important recognition is
mm,
it's a season. And
yes,
so you'll get back to those days
right.
maybe at some point, but right now, being home with your son is really quite a gift.
It is such a blessing. So I'm not as prolific as I have been in the past, but like I said, it was just perfect timing for a shorter novella collection for me. So that was a really sweet blessing.
That's awesome. So when you think about like your journey and the path you've been on, is there anything that if you could rewind the clock, you would tell a
Mm.
younger Kristen who wanted to be a writer, like any advice that you would give her?
Any advice? I think it would be just be faithful with writing and leave the the opportunities to God because, a lot of times I look back and I see, oh wow, I was hustling. I was working so hard and I was pushing and trying to get that door to open and it closed. And then out of the blue or, an opportunity I didn't think was going to amount to anything turned into everything. So I think looking back, it's, do the work, be faithful, but in the long run, realize that it's God that opens the doors and closes the doors. And so don't worry so much about that. It doesn't depend all on me.
Yeah, and it's so easy to, especially as you were
Hmm.
mentioning before, you see what people are doing on social media, and it's so easy
Right.
to start going, "Oh, I'm behind," or "I'm ahead," or "I'm,"
Hmm.
whatever the comparison is.
Right.
And so just to be able to go be faithful with where you are is such
Yes.
great advice. Such great advice. So I think this one's kind of a fun one. If you had the opportunity to have Beneath the Crushing Waves made into a movie, who would you have star as the leads?
So for my heroine Jenny, I would choose, and again, this is hypothetical because I can't rewind the clock, but Meg Ryan in You Got Mail, like
Mm-mm.
she would be my heroine. I think she would do a beautiful job with the role. And then as far as my hero, it was really a toss up between either Gerard Butler or Chris Hemsworth. But again, the
Ooh.
timelines wouldn't quite work with he has a beard. So I need somebody who can do a really credible, like tight beard. So those two came to mind, but it's a toss up. I'll let the reader decide.
Yeah, that's so fun though. And it's always fun to kind of get an idea of who you have in your
Hmm.
head for
Right,
these characters, because most of us will have some idea in
right.
our heads. So, this isn't the only book that you've had come out this year. Tell us a
No.
little bit about the third book in your Crossroads series.
Yeah, that one came out in March. It's called Watch Your Back, Book Three. And it is about a private investigator with trust issues who has to work with a Coast Guard veteran with PTSD to take out a Tampa mob boss. So it's all the books in those series can be read as standalones, but they're so interconnected. It does make sense to read them as a series. So it really brings together the loose ends from the previous two books. And if readers have fallen in love with those characters, then they get to see them back as secondary characters. So it was a really fun book to write, and still can't believe that book and Truth came out in the same year.
Yeah,
So
that's
it's been a
amazing.
busy first half of the year.
Now, is that the end of the series, or do you envision more books in the series?
It very well could be the end. I potentially envision a Christmas novella at some point with the characters, kind of like a reunion book. We'll see. I'm not sure, but for now, that one's a nice little bookend on that series.
Yeah, I love Christmas novellas. They're so
Mm,
much fun to write.
yes.
There's just something about, the warm fuzzies of Christmas,
And it's
even
so
as
hot in
yet.
Florida right now. I could go for a Christmas novella.
Yeah, no kidding. They're very fun because you write them in the summer
Hmm.
almost every time, and you're editing them at a time when you're like, okay, I need ice cream, I need all the cold drinks. And
Yes.
so it's a good
Just
time to
walk through
do
Hobby
that.
Lobby this time of year. They've probably got their Christmas decorations up
That's
already.
true. Yeah, we were on campus for something a week and a half ago, and they were doing
Hmm.
Christmas in July. They had the Christmas
Oh,
carols playing, they were doing turkey and
sure.
all the things. And I was just like, I wasn't quite ready for that.
Right.
But I was like, okay, you should have seen the expressions on the students' faces that they were like, Christmas carols? I'm like, just go with it. Just go with it. It's all fine.
Just run with it.
Yeah, exactly. So, in writing, how do you handle like the rejections and the setbacks that just tend to
Mm.
be part of the journey?
I feel like as a writer, you just develop what everyone calls rhino skin. You get there. At the point, I almost, I see my young niece who loves writing, and I know it's so hard to get rejected or get criticism at that age. Versus now, I'm like, just bring it on. Tell me, what
Yeah.
do I need to do better? I think you can get to the point though where you're like, oh, of course it's a rejection because that's, we're just used to it. But I don't know. I also try to keep I love the book called What If It's Wonderful by Nicole Zaswowski. I'm not sure if I'm saying her last name right, but she's like, don't get so jaded by rejections that you lose the wonder of what if it's wonderful? What if it's an acceptance? So I try to have that balance of yes, rejections and setbacks are just part of the writer's life and we learn from them. But at the same time, God does open the right doors at the right time. So what if it's wonderful? What if this is going to be the next one? So just to have that balanced perspective, something I try to maintain, but not always successfully.
I love that idea, but what if it's wonderful? Because
Right.
it can be so easy to lose sight of that,
Hmm.
because it is such a hard industry if
Hmm.
you're going for traditional publishing. And even on the indie track, there's so much you have to do, and then you still have
Right.
to connect with readers so that they'll buy your
Hmm.
books, and
Right.
so it can just be feel like a hard slog.
Right.
And so that what if it is wonderful? What if it's just the right words that somebody needs at this moment in
Hmm.
time can really be encouraging.
Right. So a balanced approach, I guess.
Yeah. So, are there any books or authors that inspired you to be a writer?
I definitely Danny Petrie's her Alaskan Courage series. I never thought I was going to write romantic suspense when I read it, but I loved it so much. So now looking back, I can see how that probably kind of encouraged me down this
Mhm.
road. Other writers, I mean, just the writers who've invested in me at writers' conferences, even if they don't primarily write in the genre. Eva Marie Everson, she is just constantly pouring into people. Edie Melson, Diane Mills, they go to these conferences and they just pour into you. And so writers like that, whether it is the romantic suspense genre that they write in or something else, I just love learning from them and just their experience that really applies to any genre.
I love that. And if you could pick one of them, like to be your mentor for the
Hmm.
next year, who would you pick?
Oh, wouldn't that be like a genie in the bottle request,
Yeah,
right?
wouldn't that be amazing?
If I could pick anyone, I would love to ask Eva Marie. She would just be a fabulous mentor. She's written so many books in so many genres. So that's one thing. A lot of writers will focus, as you know, on one genre. And I'm kind of a genre skipper, which I know isn't like, I've done young adult, I've done women's. I have a secret dream of writing children's books for my son, so I know my agent, she's like, okay, that's good too, but let's keep writing over here.
Yeah.
um, but I think it would be just great to see how she's done that gracefully. I would love
Mhm.
to know how you can effectively write for different audiences and kind of connect them and their mutual interests. So I don't know. She's got a full plate. I have a lot of respect for her, but it would be pretty cool to have her for a mentor.
That would be. I love that because she does. She pours into so
Oh,
many
yeah.
writers through her conferences and just
Hmm.
all the different ways that she's giving back and
Right.
just excessively, which is
Yes.
so awesome. So, where can readers learn more about you and your books? Where's the best place to connect with you?
Sure. So my website, KristenHogreffParnell.com, and I'm not going to spell it. I'm sure it'll be in the show notes.
Yeah, it
That's
sure
the
will.
best way. Um, I have a monthly newsletter, so giveaways, any new releases or news. Don't flood your inbox just once a month. And then pretty much on the major social media, if you're on Instagram or Facebook, I'd love to connect with you there too. But yeah, my website is kind of like the central hub. And then just for signing up for the newsletter, there's a free novella that introduces my crossroads suspense setting. So that's kind of a fun get to know me as well.
I love that. And those freebies that come with joining
Hmm.
newsletters are such a great way for
Right.
readers to learn and see a little bit about like your style. And so that's
Hmm.
a great way for people to connect with your books and learn a little bit more about how you write romantic suspense. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been so fun to reconnect with you.
Thank you, Kara. It's been so fun. Thanks for having me back.